August 1945. As World War II came to a devastating close, thousands of Japanese military personnel faced a fate they had been taught to fear more than death itself: surrender. For years, Japanese soldiers were indoctrinated with a simple but brutal message. Capture meant dishonor worse than death. Surrender would bring shame not just to themselves, but to their entire families. Their sisters might never find husbands. Their children would be denied education and employment. But what happened next would shock them to their core. To understand the shock Japanese POWs experienced, we must first understand what they expected. Throughout the war, Japanese military culture viewed surrender as the ultimate disgrace. The unofficial message from their government was clear: prisoners of war returning home could expect execution. This wasn't just military doctrine. It was woven into the fabric of Japanese honor culture. Japanese soldiers fought with legendary tenacity, often choosing death over capture. By the end of 1942, fewer than 1,000 Japanese soldiers had surrendered to Allied forces, while over 200,000 British Commonwealth and American soldiers languished in Japanese prison camps. But the Japanese soldiers' fear of capture wasn't entirely unfounded. Many had witnessed or participated in the brutal treatment of Chinese prisoners during the war in China. They projected this same fate onto themselves, convinced that American forces would torture and execute them. Japanese propaganda reinforced these fears, spreading stories of American cruelty. The message was clear: better to die fighting than to face what awaited you in enemy hands. When Japanese soldiers finally did surrender, whether from wounds, exhaustion, or the emperor's unprecedented broadcast, they braced themselves for the worst. They expected beatings, torture, summary execution, everything their military training and propaganda had warned them about. Instead, something remarkable happened. The Western Allies had directed their forces to treat Japanese POWs according to the Geneva Conventions. And while battlefield emotions sometimes interfered with this directive, many Japanese prisoners were stunned by what they encountered. They were given food, real food, not scraps, medical treatment for their wounds, clothing, basic human dignity. Historical records show that Japanese POWs appreciated the opportunity to converse with Japanese-speaking Americans and felt that the food, clothing, and medical treatment they were provided with meant that they owed favors to their captors. Many prisoners, believing they had lost all rights by surrendering, were shocked to find they had any rights at all. They didn't know about the Geneva Convention. They didn't know prisoners could refuse questioning. The humane treatment they received was completely outside their frame of reference. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Because these soldiers believed they had already severed all ties with Japan by surrendering, many provided valuable intelligence to their interrogators, feeling indebted to captors who had treated them with unexpected humanity. But the most dramatic transformation occurred after Japan's formal surrender, when General Douglas MacArthur became Supreme Commander for the Allied powers, effectively the ruler of occupied Japan. MacArthur understood something crucial. How you treat a defeated enemy determines whether they become a future ally or a perpetual threat. At his appointment, MacArthur announced he sought to restore security, dignity, and self-respect to the Japanese people. This wasn't just rhetoric. It became the foundation of his occupation strategy. MacArthur's most controversial decision shocked both Americans and Japanese. He protected Emperor Hirohito from prosecution as a war criminal. Many Americans wanted the emperor tried and executed. The Japanese expected it. MacArthur argued against it. His reasoning was both pragmatic and profound. He believed that humiliating the emperor would trigger violent resistance and revolution, requiring potentially 1 million occupation troops to maintain order. Instead, he allowed Hirohito to remain as a symbolic figurehead, helping the emperor save face while transforming Japan's government from imperial militarism to democracy. MacArthur's occupation focused on rebuilding, not subjugating. His first priority wasn't punishment. It was feeding the starving population. American forces established army kitchens and airlifted food to prevent famine and unrest. Rather than imposing direct military rule, MacArthur's administration worked through existing Japanese civil structures, encouraging local officials and citizens to take initiative in implementing reforms. The goal was to help Japanese people avoid the loss of self-respect and self-confidence. The result was extraordinary. The Japanese people began referring to MacArthur as Gaijin Shogun, the foreign military leader, a title of deep respect. Thousands of Japanese citizens sent him letters, gifts, and even marriage proposals. The contrast with how Japan had treated Allied prisoners couldn't have been starker. During the war, roughly 27% of Western Allied POWs in Japanese custody died, with death rates reaching over 34% for Australian prisoners and nearly 33% for Americans. By comparison, the death rate for Allied POWs in German custody was around 4%. Allied prisoners faced starvation, brutal forced labor, inadequate medical care, and systematic abuse. The Bataan Death March, the Hell Ships, the Palawan Massacre. These became infamous examples of how Japan's military culture, which viewed surrender as shameful, translated into the dehumanization of enemy prisoners. When Japanese soldiers and officers found themselves at the mercy of the very enemy they'd been taught to fear and hate, they encountered something their military culture hadn't prepared them for: respect. American forces, despite their justified anger over Pearl Harbor, the Bataan Death March, and countless other atrocities, largely adhered to international law and basic human decency. MacArthur's approach to defeated Japan proved revolutionary. His occupation lasted 7 years, and during that time, Japan underwent one of history's most dramatic transformations. A new constitution came into effect in 1947, with Article 9 effectively outlawing aggressive war. The military government that had dominated Japan was dismantled. Democratic institutions were established. Women gained the right to vote. When MacArthur was finally relieved of his command in 1951 and departed Japan, thousands of Japanese lined the streets in genuine sorrow. The Asahi Shimbun newspaper published an editorial titled, "Lament for General MacArthur." Crowds held signs in English, "We love you. We are grateful to the General. Sayonara." The Japanese Diet passed a resolution citing MacArthur as the one who helped our country out of the confusion and poverty prevailing at the time the war ended. Within a decade of being bitter enemies locked in total war, the United States and Japan had forged an alliance that continues to this day. The story of Japanese POWs expecting persecution but receiving respect offers profound lessons about breaking cycles of violence and vengeance. MacArthur certainly wasn't perfect. He was known for being imperious, self-promoting, and politically ambitious. His protection of some war criminals in exchange for research data remains controversial, and the respectful treatment of Japanese POWs, while remarkable, couldn't undo the suffering Allied prisoners had endured. But in choosing dignity over humiliation, reconstruction over revenge, and future alliance over past grievance, the American occupation of Japan demonstrated something powerful. How we treat defeated enemies shapes not just their future, but ours. Japanese soldiers expected the worst because that's what their military culture had taught them to expect, and tragically, often what they had inflicted on others. What they received instead, respect, basic dignity, and the chance to rebuild, shocked them precisely because it was so unexpected. And in that shock, in that fundamental disruption of expectations, lay the seeds of one of history's most successful transitions from enemies to allies. The lesson remains relevant. Revenge may feel satisfying, but respect builds lasting peace. If you found this story fascinating, there's so much more to explore about the Pacific War, the occupation of Japan, and how former enemies became allies. Check the description for sources and further reading. What do you think? Could this model of respectful occupation work in other conflicts? Let me know in the comments below.